Okay, we are going to be looking at the yellow word sort 23 today. Okay, so for the last few lessons, you have been looking at short and long vowel sounds. So let's just recap what they are. So you've got a, and then a, e, e, I, o, a, and u. So a, e, I, o, a, and a, e, I, o, u. Okay, so we have been looking at patterns in words that make the vowel say its name versus its short sound. So pretty standard, sort of the first words you learn when you're learning to read are cats and pen and tin and pop and cup. You know, the consonant, vowel, consonant words. And so of course you're not, in year one in kinder anymore, so you're learning more sophisticated spelling patterns, and you're learning how, in spelling, how we get these different long vowel sounds. So we can have things like AI saying A, we could have A, Y saying A, and of course we've got Magic E who comes in with each one of these. If you add a Magic E word letter to mad, it says made. If it was I, mid, say mide. So that's a made up word obviously, but you get the idea. So Magic E is with all of these, is one of the ways it can say its long sound. But there are a couple of phonograms we learnt for each. So you can even think through, even just take a second to just think through in your mind, what are some of the vowel teams that say E? What are some of the vowel teams that say I? You might remember IE is one of them. What about O? What are some of the vowel teams that say O? Like road, row. What about U? UE. And there are a couple of others. So with each of the vowels we learned one or two vowel teams, and then we learnt the Magic E. And of course that fourth method with each of them is that if the vowel finishes a syllable, like in paper, then it says its long sound. So vowels always say the long sound if they finish a syllable, open syllable that is. So we have looked over the last few weeks, and we've looked at, each week we've looked at a different letter, and we've looked at some vowel teams that make it say its long sound. What we're going to do today is pick out two of the vowels that have a sort of another rule on top of what we've learnt. I and O have another rule. And that other rule is, and I'm going to write it down, and I want you to write it down in your notes. So if you're taking notes, once I've written this down, you might even pause it or try and write it slowly and you can keep up with me. Okay, so I and O often say their name, meaning long sound, when followed, oh look at my funny bent cap, followed by two consonants. I and O often say their name, long sound, when followed by two consonants. So let's look at a few words that this applies to. So let's look at, that says moss, M-O-S, moss. But if I put moss, st, suddenly that says most, most. And let's look at an I word. So what does this word say? Fin, that's a CVC word. So that says fin. But what if I put a second consonant, two consonants? Suddenly this says I, find. So when we have these two consonants, I and O often say their name. Notice this does not say always. So this is one of those rules that you'll see is a most of the time type rule. So we're going to be looking at the rule, but also looking at some exceptions, because this is the kind of rule that does have a few exceptions and some of them are quite common words. So we're looking at this rule and then we're going to be looking at the exceptions. So we've got moss and most, fin and find. Okay, so and just to show you, so for example, if you've got the word cas, that's not a word, but I can't think of an example for the moment, and then I add st, that still says cast or cast. It doesn't suddenly say cased. If we have oh, I can't think of an example of a good word. If I think of a good word, but I'm just sort of trying to show you that this rule only applies for I and O. I should have thought of some examples beforehand, but hopefully that shows you that this is just for I and O. Often say their name when followed by two consonants. So let's do the word sort together. Now, if you haven't jotted that down, just go move the video back a bit and pause it and write that rule down. Now we're going to get on to do the word sort. And as we do the word sort, I will just take a little bit of time to sort of look at some words and analyse that rule in the context and see if it's a rule or exception. Okay, so we've got four categories and then oddball. So I'm just going to use a different pen for the headings. So we've got I, which is our CVC, and then we've got I, which is our CVCC, two consonants. We've got O, CVC, O, CVCC, two consonants. And then we've got oddball. Okay, so there are 5 headings. Let me just check that none of those are glared out. Yep, that's good. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the words for our list. Okay, so let's start with the one we've already done. So we did m, o, st. Okay, two consonants. So hopefully you can see that most belongs here. Most. M, o, st. You can actually distinctly hear that st as two different syllables. Yep, two different consonants. Okay, let's post. P-O-st. That belongs over here too. P-O-st. Okay, so let's have a look at some ot words in our list. Okay, we've got moth, m-o. Now you might be thinking, well, hang on, that's two consonants. Why doesn't it belong there? But let's just think about that. Th is actually kind of one. It's a consonant team, isn't it? It's a consonant team. It's really not making two distinct consonant sounds. So m-oth, when you say that, it kind of is following that CVC pattern. So that seems right that belongs in that list actually. We've got sock, s-o-k. Again, we've got a double k. Kind of, yes, it's two consonants, but it is still making that sound. S-o-k. That only has 3 sounds in it, that word. Sock, m-oth. So it is following that. This is m-o-st, p-o-st. So you will see that some double consonants that make one sound tend to fall into this CVC pattern. And again, we will still see some exceptions, so we'll get onto that, but I want to start with the ones that aren't the exceptions. Okay, let's go down this column here. So we've got our I sound. So we've got words like find, I-nd, find, two consonants. We've got words like wild, child, we've got words like kind. You are a very kind person, to be so helpful. Kind, k-I-n-d. See, following this pattern. It's quite cool. Mind, blind, and wind. Now, this can also say wind, so we'll look at that later. But we can see that basically they all say I, and they follow this very clear CVCC pattern. We've got this double consonant at the end. Now, what do you notice about the two consonants that seem to be finishing all these words? Do you notice a pattern? Can you see a pattern with the letters that are being used? I can see a pattern. I can see ND and LD seem to be the two letters that are most commonly following I to make it say I. So that's just something to note, because that's the whole point of doing this style of spelling teaching, is to train you to see patterns, because it helps you spell words. So that's just something to note. You can see the LD and ND. So having seen that LD and ND seem to be the double consonant pattern, seems to be ND and LD are our common consonant finishes, let's look at some words that don't follow the CVCC rule. So let's try fist. F-I-st. St. Okay? So yes, it is the st. So that could say feist, but it actually says fist. So, but you might see, well, it's not ND and LD, and those ones tend to be LD and ND. So maybe I can see a reason why that's an exception. I'm not putting in an oddball. It's fitting under the, we're calling this a sort of rule-abiding exception. And then what about wind? Because of course we've got wind and wind. So we could put this in an oddball and say, no, it's just an exception. Two different ways of saying exactly the same word. And the last one we've got here, third, is pitch. Now, TCH, as you can see, is actually a consonant team, and it sort of makes one sound, doesn't it? P-I-ch. We don't say pit-ch, we say pitch. So I think this is probably the word in this list that's most obedient to this CVC rule, because that's kind of making one sound. But those three words are the three words in your list that make the short sound. You've got fist, wind, and pitch. And then we've got find, wild, child, kind, mind, blind, and wind. So this one is the wind as in wind it up, winding up a crank, or you wind up your brother or sister by frustrating them. This one's wind as in, you know, wind. Ooh, that does not look like wind. It looks like a tree on the side, but never mind. We've got wind and wind. Okay, so that's all our I words. Let's go back to our O words. So we've got, let's look at our OT list. So we've got moth, sock. We've got the word robin. So that is a CVC pattern in that word. We've got, and last word, we've only got 4 words in this list. We've got soft. Now this is sort of, you know, soft. Oh, why isn't it soft? It just isn't. So even though this is not actually obedient to this CVC, we're seeing that as a CVC. So we'll see that LD and ND tend to be common here. We might see a similar pattern here. So let's keep going with all our, we've got post, we've got told, got cold, we've got both, both, oath, roll, scold. That's like telling someone off, and it also means burn. So, you know, I guess you can say, oh, burn when someone gets told off. Well, the same, scold is sort of the same meaning. Gold, we've got post, oh, and ghost, ghost. So can we see a pattern here with our finishing consonants? ST and LD do seem to be common, don't they? ST and LD. So LD seems to cross across both, but the ND seems to be common with the I, and the ST seems to be common with the O. It's just something to observe. We're just observing patterns. And then our one oddball word over here is friend. Fry end. Fry end. That is just to help you remember how to spell friend. Fry end. That's how I got taught in primary school, and I've never forgotten it. And I've always known how to spell friend. So, fry end. Okay, so we've got our double consonant ending O words. Our OT words. We've got our double consonant ending I words. And we've got our IT words. So, our rule is that often when O is followed by ST, it says O, and when I is followed by consonant, consonant, sorry, not ST, consonant, consonant. When I is followed by consonant, consonant, often says I, but as we can see, not always. And as we can see, not always. But we can see patterns, the LD-ND pattern and the ST-LD pattern. So hopefully this lesson has been helpful in helping you learn how words can say their long vowel sounds and why they say them, and help you with your spelling and your writing. Okay, have fun practicing your words this week. Bye.